Respected Chair and my dear friends, in this paper I am concentrating on one beautiful homily written by Jacob of Sarov, the three dead people raised by Christ. This homily is taken from the second volume of the collection of homilies published by Paul Berjan. The English title has been taken from Sebastian Brock, who has published a translation of the titles collected by Berjan. The homily number, according to Berjan, is 48, and the stated manuscript base is Bodleian Library, Syriac 135, folio 144, and Vatican Syrian 118, folio 131. This homily consists of 131 stanzas in 12-syllable meter. According to the Gospels, Jesus performed many miracles. However, the Gospel authors chose to list 3 resurrection miracles that Jesus had performed: Jairus' daughter, the widow's son, and Lazarus. According to Jacob of Sarov, these 3 miracles indicate 3 crucial points in the life cycle of a man. The 12-year-old girl, the young man, and the grown-up Lazarus were restored to life. Childhood, adolescence, and adulthood are not proper time for death. Jesus performed these 3 miracles at 3 different places: in the house where the road of death begins, in the middle of the road, and at the end of the death in the grave. In all these places, our Lord set up a lodging of peace. Christ's descent into Sheol, an important theme of Syriac eschatology. The main thrust of this homily is the descent of Christ into Sheol, which is an important theme of Syriac eschatology. Syriac spirituality has a well-developed theme of the descent into the Sheol. Jesus emptied himself to die on the cross and go down to the place of the dead, Sheol. Jacob of Sarov emphasizes in this homily that by his entering, Christ expelled the smelling of death and the darkness of Sheol. His burial announced to the dead their hope in life and resurrection. As it is accustomed to the Syriac fathers, Jacob of Sarov starts this homily by acknowledging his unworthiness and beseeching God to fill his soul with light and give him a heart purified from bodily thoughts. In his homilies, Jacob of Sarov follows a pattern of praising God with all the faculties of his body. Here he refers Napsha, Lemba, Hushave, Pagaranaya, Hauna, Madhua, Puma, etc. Jacob of Sarov presents Christ as the bridegroom of light who sanctifies the people that came after him, giving up their vain idols. I quote from the homily. The translation is my own. Behold, the young women gave up the idols of their fathers, and they came after you, the bridegroom of light, that you may sanctify them. The daughters of Arameans who forged idols of naught loved you, and they went astray from all the gods of their fathers. According to Jacob of Sarov, the starting point of the redemption of mankind is the mercy of God. Our Lord was very sympathetic towards the shortcomings of the weak and fragile human nature, and was very sorry upon the corruption of mankind. I quote from the homily. And our Lord pitied and saw his image descended to Sheol. And he was very sorry upon the corruption of mankind. And he arose to come to set order his image that was corrupted, and to make peace in the way of death which was bitter. Jacob Saruk draws the imagery of a new well that sprang from Christ on Golgotha, which waters all the earth and make it Eden of God. This fountain became the only one which gave life to the whole world. A quote from the homily. A new well sprang from you on Golgotha, and all the earth became Eden of God by its watering. By the lands they hollowed out you as if a mountain, and from you went forth one fountain which gave life to the whole world. In Genesis 26, we see Isaac redug Abraham's well, which was stopped up by the Philistines, and went on to dig new wells. His first well was in the valley of Gerar, and was the more valuable because it was not the mere remains of the water of the torrent, but was fed by the spring, as we learn from its being called a well of living water. Jesus told to the Samaritan woman who was at Jacob's well that if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Jesus became the living water for the whole world through his sacrifice on Golgotha. During the period of Jesus' public ministry, so many persons would have died in Palestine. But Gospel gives description of only 3 resurrection miracles performed by Jesus. According to Jacob of Saruk, these 3 descriptions have a special intent. They are the 3 witnesses to ratify the living word which he spoke. The people, the priests, and the scribes despised his teaching, so he wanted to prove his proclamation by these 3 witnesses. He wants to give hope to the dead that they shall live. A quote from the homily. The people, the priests, and the scribes envied on him greatly against his death. His teaching was despised by them, and he wished to bring 3 witnesses from among the dead, so that to ratify through them the word of life which he spoke. Daughter of Jairus, and son of the widow, and Lazarus, 3 dead, 3 witnesses for his proclamation. Because he saw that they are not convinced when he taught, he vivified 3 to confirm his words with his deeds. The number 3 is very often used in the Bible to indicate completeness. For example, Jesus answered Satan's 3-fold temptations with 3 scriptural references. Jesus' ministry lasted 3 years. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and 3 times Jesus affirmed his love. Jesus resurrected on the 3rd day. We wonder, when we put together the events scattered here and there in the Bible, we see a mysterious totality and wholeness. Here Christ vivified these 3 dead at 3 different places. One was raised in the house, other was raised in the middle of the way, and another from the grave He not only vivified them, but reunited them with their loved ones. He gave the daughter to his father, the young to his mother, and Lazarus to his sisters. Another thing we understand from the gospel about these people is that they are the only daughter, the only son of his mother, and the only brother of his sisters. In these three resurrection miracles performed by Jesus, he is present and acts with loving compassion to the deceased by restoring them to life, and to the living by accompanying them through their sorrow, and finally by reuniting them with their loved ones. Some important typology and paradoxes he uses in this homily. Eve-Mary typology. Jacob of Saruk tries to compare Eve with Mary. The role of Mary in the dispensation of Christ can be seen as Eve's counterpart. The Eve prepared a path to the tomb from the paradise, and the entire human race went through her to the house of perdition. The Eve disobeyed God and followed the words of the serpent. Here Eve acts as a mediator between the serpent and Adam. And thus Eve became for mankind a source for the course to the tomb. I quote from the homily. The Eve prepared a path to the tomb from the paradise, and the entire race was going through it to the house of perdition. The evil snake was the beginning of the way of death, and between him and Eve, he persuaded Adam to come to the Sheol. And the Eve became like a source of mankind, and she directed them to walk towards the tomb. Instead of this path, which led to death, a highway erected and came from Bethlehem, from Mary, who substituted Eve. Thus, the way of death is hindered and turns back to Eden. Mary heard and believed the words of the angel at the Annunciation and gave the new Adam through which he comes to undo the fall of the first Adam through his paschal mystery. I quote from the homily. His highway arose to come from Bethlehem, from Mary, who substituted the Virgin Eve, who is the cause. He showed himself in the congregations to make them hear that the way of death is hindered and turns back to Eden. Another paradox he uses, the sweetness of life versus bitterness of death. By restoring to life the only son of his mother, Christ put the sweetness of life in the mouth of widow. I quote from the homily. There he put the sweetness of life in the mouth of the widow, that no one may say that death is bitter on the way of Sheol. Another paradox he uses, foul smell of death versus sweet aroma of cross. Usually one smells the odor of death in places of death, but Jesus, through his crucifixion, expelled the odor of death to extend his sweet aroma among the faithful departed. I quote from the homily. And death sent from the darkness foul smell. Oil of myrrh springs from the wood of your crucifixion, and its sweet aroma pleased your congregation. Another paradox he uses, the naked and weak Christ versus the strong walls of Sheol. The only way before Christ to deliver the corrupted mankind was the way of suffering. According to the Syriac tradition, Jesus Christ had the experience of humiliation by his death, and thus he was raised to enter his glory. A quote from the homily, and placed a way of suffering through which he may walk, and by which the corrupted mankind may come to life. You are great, O my Lord, even when you came to the feebleness, that by the weakness you broke down the walls of the Sheol. Christ chose the way of suffering to redeem the humanity. The infirm and weak Christ on the cross became the hero in the Sheol. Jacob Saruk sarcastically emphasizes this paradox in this homily. Jacob Saruk presents Christ as Ganbara in Sheol, a hero in the Sheol. Sheol is the abode of the departed, where they wait for Christ. The Syriac tradition proposes the idea of Sheol as the habitation of the dead in order to accommodate the departed ones till their resurrection on the last day. Sheol is to be seen not as a particular place, but as the condition of the dead who are waiting for their final reward at the parousia of the Lord. The victory of Christ over the death was a victory over the power of Sheol, which had hitherto held all the dead under its bondage. Christ delivered all the good souls who were under the bondage of Sheol. The descent of Christ into the house of the dead after his death on the cross terrified the powers of Sheol. Jacob Saruk describes Christ as a hero, Ganbara, who with his great valor brought forth from Sheol the captives who were imprisoned there. Three images of valor. Christ performed three demonstrations of his valor on the way of the tomb, that it is the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. A quote from the homily. On the way of the tomb, he performed three demonstrations of his valor. And he brought out from the teeth of the greedy death. On the entire way of the death, there are imageries of your valor. At every abode that is in it, icons were raised to your honor. At the beginning, in the house of Jairus, by resuscitating the little girl in the house of Jairus, Christ performed his valor at the very beginning. The little girl is the one who gives the crown as victorious. A quote from the homily. At the beginning of the way, the house of Jairus will praise, because in it the girl gives the crown as victory. This first miracle was a sign to the great people who were present at the house of Jairus, who was the ruler of a Galilean synagogue. From the homily I quote, great people who were there saw the sign, and with wonder the light of the resurrection of the dead appeared. The second one, in the middle on the way at the gate of the city. In the second miracle, a serpent is depicted which swallowed the dead one. Christ as a warrior brought out the dead one from its terrific teeth. I quote from the homily. In the middle of the way, a serpent is depicted which swallowed the dead one. And again, while he is drawing out and bringing out the dead from its teeth, Christ showed himself as mighty breaker in the second miracle. As a mighty breaker. The life then crushed the death at the door of the city as a mighty breaker, and it was trampled there. third one, at the end in the tomb of Lazarus. At the end of the way, the image of Christ is depicted as a hero who knocked out the Sheol and caused her to give birth to a dead person. A quote from the homily. At the end of the way, your image will be depicted as a hero because who knocked out the Sheol, and within no time she gave birth to a dead one. Christ stood on the door of the death like a mighty man, depicted as thunder of life in this third miracle. I quote, our Lord set out a journey, came and reached there, and stood on the door of the death, knocked like a mighty man. According to Jacob Saru, Christ came to make good hope for the departed. The descent of Christ into Sheol gave good hope for those who reside in it. Till that time, it was a place of darkness, despair, and lamentations. According to Jacob, while walking on the trodden way of grave, Christ saw that it was filled with utter despair. So he filled it with apartments of great hope. I quote, inside the door of the lover of darkness was filled with lamentations, where there was no hope for the dead who were pulled down in it. And he came to make good hope towards the end. He came to the tomb, which is at the end of the way, to make one abode where there is hope to those who reside in it. And he saw a place of despair filled with corruption. Milestones of peace and consolation. Mile the Shaina Vadlubaba. Christ anointed the Sheol and placed in it milestone of peace and consolation so that nobody may come to despair when he travels through it. In ancient times, milestone was one of a series of numbered markers placed at the side of a road at regular distances. This is used to reassure travelers that the proper path is being followed and to indicate either distance traveled or the remaining distance to a destination. In the path of the Sheol, Christ established milestone of peace and consolation to reassure those who travel through it that they are on the right path. Towers of peace and apartments of life. More than that, our Lord built towers of peace at the abyss of the death and apartments of life at equal distances on the whole road in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. To conclude, the main thrust of this homily is the descent of Christ into Sheol, which is an important theme of Syriac eschatology. For the Eastern Church, the theology of life after death is an act of faith, of a true meditation on death and life, of waiting for the coming of the groom Jesus. Jacob of Saruk presents Christ as the bridegroom of light who sanctifies the peoples that came after him, giving up their vain idols. Our Lord was very sorry upon the corruption of mankind, so he decided to set order his image that was corrupted and to make peace in the way of death which was bitter. A new well that sprang from Christ on Golgotha gave life to the whole world. During the period of Jesus' public ministry, he vivified only 3 persons. They are the 3 witnesses to ratify the living word which he spoke. He wants to give hope to the dead that they shall live. Jesus performed these 3 miracles at 3 crucial points: in the house where the road of death begins, in the middle of the road, and at the end in the grave. In all these places, death was made a mockery before the crowd. Through these miracles, the crowd saw the light of resurrection dawn with great wonder and were amazed. Jacob of Saruk tries to compare Eve with Mary. The Eve prepared a path to the tomb from the paradise. Instead of this path, which led to the death, a highway erected and came from Bethlehem from Mary, who substituted Eve. We see also some paradoxes which beautifully explain the life-death tug-of-war. Sweetness of life against bitterness of death, foul smell of death against sweet aroma of cross, the naked and weak Christ against the strong walls of Sheol. Christ as Ganbara in Sheol is a major theme of this homily. Christ as a hero who, with his great valor, brought forth from Sheol the captives who were imprisoned there. Christ performed the three demonstrations of his valor on the way of the tomb, at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. In the beginning of the way, at the house of Jairus, he performed his valor, and the little girl is the one who gives the crown as victorious. In the middle on the way, at the gate of the city, a serpent is depicted which swallowed the dead one, and he brought out the dead from its teeth. At the end of the way, the image of Christ is depicted as a hero who knocked out the Sheol and caused her to give birth to a dead person. The descent of Christ into Sheol gave good hope for those who reside in it. Christ anointed the Sheol and placed in it milestones of peace and consolation, so that nobody may come to despair when he travels through it. More than that, our Lord built towers of peace at the abyss of the death and apartments of life at equal distances on the whole road, in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. Thus Christ made the abode, which was a place of terror forever, a harbor of peace for all those who entered in it. Thank you.